Okay, so this is video number 3. I'm gonna try to get better at this stuff. I'm talking through my Bluetooth headset in my helmet while I'm riding my electric motorcycle. That's why it's so quiet. Trying to get better at not yelling into the microphone if I can help it. We'll see how it goes. So this video, maybe a little bit less structured than previous ones. I'll try to keep from rambling. This video is going to be about emotional control as a leader and a follower and just a human being in general. Mostly focus on one of my personal experiences, and something still challenges me to this day sometimes is learning how to flip the switch back on sometimes. So basically, the whole point of this conversation is about how there are times in your life where you really need to turn your emotions off in order to get a job done, get a mission done, make something happen for your family or friends or whatever it may be. Typically, it's going to be an intense situation, high stress, high stakes type thing. But it's not always. Sometimes people turn things into that kind of situation, even when it doesn't warrant it. But hey, that's what we're talking about, right? Emotional control, knowing when to do it, and trying to learn how to turn it back on. So I'm just going to go straight into my personal experience story because I think that's the best way to do this one. So it was a couple of years ago in Afghanistan. This lovely place called the Tangi Valley, real dangerous. The American forces hadn't really been set up there fully just yet. We were there with what's called a route clearance package. We were actually outside the valley when we got a call for a post-blast analysis on what was called an ETT, or Embedded Training Team. We drive up through this real skinny, narrow mountain pass in our giant armored vehicles, which was certainly a bit unnerving. And it was definitely a foreboding drive because there were no people in any of the villages along the way. The only people we saw were one or two 30, 40-year-old males who absolutely could tell were not a fan of us being there just by the look on their face when they saw us coming. We get up to the scene, and there's a burning vehicle upside down in a pretty big crater. And normally, the unit that gets hit by an IED will then pull security, so we come out and do a post-blast analysis as DoD techs and figure out what happened and hopefully try and get the bad guys and keep it from happening another time. This was different. We showed up, and the guys who were holding security on the wreckage weren't the unit that was hit, and they didn't know who that unit even was. And come to find out later on, basically what happened is we were on one side of this ambush, and there was another vehicle that was hit on the other side. So we were basically vehicle 1 in convoy order, and the vehicle that we responded to, when it got hit, it got thrown in the air pretty high and landed up on its roof back in the crater that was underneath of it, which made the rest of the convoy stop. And then the third vehicle got hit by a similar IED. So the second vehicle knew that everybody was dead that was hit, so they just left. So definitely a very strange situation to roll up on. So we start doing our post-blast. I get out with my mine detector, start taking a walk down range, figure out what's going on, if there's any secondary IEDs or other explosive hazards left. And this vehicle was still sort of burning in some spots. It had a Mark 19 on it, which is a 40 millimeter rifle grenade machine gun. And the ammunition for that is extremely sensitive and dangerous. whenever it's been fired or involved in a fire. So there were probably 50, 60 of those, called them golden goose eggs, laying around that had been on fire for past, I don't know, probably 30 to 40 minutes. And of course, we had to clear all those before we could get to clearing the vehicle and then recover the vehicle. So that took us a solid amount of time to safely do. While we were doing that, there was down off to the side a couple of troops in contact going on, or picks as we call them. Basically just a fancy word for a gunfight. The other side of the woods. So that kind of made us want to not rush, but expedite the process where possible. So we found some creative ways to make that happen with the 40 mils, the rifle grenades, and then got to the vehicle, cleared the whole crater, and I cleared the blast seat around it, tried to find triggering mechanism, whatever function this IED. And then after all that was clear, we set about recovering the vehicle because, of course, we can't just leave it there. And our route clearance package team had a whole bunch of assets specifically for that, a wrecker with a crane and flatbed and that kind of stuff. So we started to lift the cab of the Hummer a little bit to try and get it out of the crater. And I need to take a step back for a second. To describe the scene a little more, I'll try to spare the graphic details, but the doors, all the doors were open on the Humvee. Well, what was left of the doors, and there were none of the crew members were remaining that we could see from the outside. And we had come to find out later they had been drug off by the Taliban, what was left of them. And then back to recovering the vehicle, we started to lift it up. We found that the gunner was still in the vehicle, so we at least got to recover one of ours right there on the spot, so that was pretty good. But that was definitely a sight you don't forget, because I'm sure he was killed instantly, but he was burned up really good after that. The sights and smells like that are definitely hard to forget. There's definitely very specific, very pointed odors that take you straight back to a memory like that. Supposedly the sense of smell is actually very close to the memory part of the brain, and that's why, but who knows. I'm sidetracking now. So we recovered the gunner. We got him in a body bag and got him inside of one of our vehicles to get him back to the nearest American base to get him home. And the whole point of all of this, right? Back to why am I even talking about this story? You know, it's not to make myself out to sound tougher, bigger, more Billy Badass than anybody else. It's nothing to do with that whatsoever. This was a pretty traumatic event for me, seeing and experiencing all this stuff. At the time, really had to keep the emotions in check, because one of the things on my mind the whole time was, you know, the people in uniform and a chaplain going to be showing up at a couple of houses sometime in the next 24 to 48 hours. And that's pretty upsetting to me. Made me pretty mad. Quite angry about that right there on the spot, and for a very long time after. Sometimes I'm still kind of mad about it, but you can't let that get in the way. You start to get mad about these things. You start to make poor decisions because you're acting emotionally instead of rationally and logically in a situation that requires well thought out plans, lots of risk calculation and mitigation. And if you start to just get angry about what's happening in front of you, you're going to make some poor risk management decisions, and that can result in people getting hurt or worse. So that's a situation where I absolutely had to turn the emotions off, focus on the task at hand, and not let the heat and the other distractions, the ticks going on, force us into your anger-based decisions. Now, the tricky part about all that is when you get back onto somewhere safe, somewhere with a nice guarded perimeter, is remembering to flip the switch back. That can be a real challenge and present some difficulties along the way. And it didn't help that we got back to our fob that night after several hours of doing this post-class analysis. And we got hit with indirect fire rockets at the fob. We were sleeping next to our MRAPs on our cots like we always did because we kind of live like nomads with that team. And like it was 3 or 4 rockets came in close enough to actually knock me out of my cot. I woke up face down in the stones, wondering why I was in the stones. Heard the whistle of the next rocket coming. Thankfully, nobody got hurt. Just hopped back up in the truck and waited for it to stop. So, that what that plays into, why does that matter, is that comes into play with, we just had this horrific situation, had to turn the emotions off, get back onto a place where you feel you're safe, you start to relax a little bit, try to find some things to laugh about or smile or whatever, or just vent to your teammates, and then you get hit with freaking rockets on top of it, so you're right back to where you were, pissed off again. So I got home from that tour definitely pretty mad about things. Stayed pretty mad about things for quite a while. But that's the thing about anger, like holding on to it. What does that do for you? That's not productive whatsoever. At the same time, it's okay to be mad. It's a natural human reaction. And if it didn't cause some emotions, then it's sort of wonder, am I some sort of sociopath, But what it all comes back to, the universal lesson for this is it's important to be a leader who has emotions and for your people to know that, as well as it's important to not be an emotional leader. If all you do is spaz out and yell at people all the time for not doing what you want them to do, you're not going to create a very good team relationship that way. So maybe you've got your emotion switch turned on too much. Maybe you need to kind of figure out how to kind of rotate that down a little bit for a little while, maybe at least with things that don't really warrant such a reaction. It kind of goes into, if you've heard me talk about responding versus reacting, certainly related to that whole thought process. But typically, people who resort straight to anger and emotions instead of a logical response lose a lot of credibility with their people. And also, if you let emotions crowd your judgment on your decision making for maybe some leadership decisions for your unit or something of that sort, you may make the wrong decisions. You may make some poor choices that actually negatively impact the task or the unit or the mission and don't help anyone, only hurt. So make sure the decision is the right one, not just for you and what you want, but the whole team. So if anybody's got any similar experiences or major disagreements, please post some comments, start a conversation, and let's talk about it. All right, till next time.